Hello again, everyone. This is the Yalak Emet channel, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon. It is the New Testament is Fake series for September 25th, 2016. The lesson today is titled Cat-2, Israel is Blind. So this is the second part of the copycat lessons. The first one, part one, talked about the rapture and the trumpet, where I explained that the trumpet is not just a sound that we've always heard in the New Testament teachings. And take a look at that, copycat number one on the New Testament is Fake series on YouTube. And today is number 2 that says Israel is blind. So I want to look at this blindness, and the way the copycat lessons are going is that I'm going to take a look at the New Testament teachings, the verses that Paul and others in the New Testament, in the general epistles and Pauline epistles, have used and taught their New Testament doctrines from it. And then I'm going to show you the root verse from the Torah where they took it from. And I will be showing that the New Testament versions, or the New Testament usage of these Old Testament root verses, was just, the usage was just erroneous in every case that I will be bringing forward. Now, the copycat lessons are just going to be so long, so I'm only going to do some of them, and the rest I probably won't bother because I made a long list, but eventually I just had to stop because there's just so much error that's found in the New Testament. So I just had to stop it at some point. But today is lesson number 2. I want to talk about the blindness in Israel. So this is Israel is blind. Let's read about one of the blindness verses in the book of Romans from Paul. Paul in Romans chapter 11 verse 25 says this: "For I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits." Now, first of all, notice that he does not wish them to be ignorant of a mystery that has to do with Christ operating in God, or as God, or through the direction of God who sent him to earth. So that would then mean that the New Testament 13th apostle, or 14th one, is telling you that God is giving an operation on earth through Jesus in which he does not want people to be ignorant. But the Old Testament shows that he gave ignorance to Israel because he blinded them, did not want them to see, to understand mysteries. So he blinded them, and later on he would be restoring them, waking them up, and so on. Now, it's clear that in the New Testament times, this waking up or removing of the blindness did not happen, as you can tell for those who have gone through quite a number of my lessons in this New Testament is Fake series. The New Testament is just out to lunch. But Paul, supposedly Hebrew of the tribe of Benjamin, and some say only a part Hebrew, he does not want people to be ignorant of the mystery or ignorant of the light of God. So he's teaching people to see light. He's telling them, look at the light, when God has made sure that their eyes cannot see light from the Old Testament curses that he put on them. So if you've got a blind person walking with a dog, their eyes just don't work. And you are going to tell them that you will fix their eyesight by just simply forcing them to look at the light. Just look, just look, just look all day long. Just look, just look. That person cannot see until their eyes begin to work. It does not matter that you teach them what light is. They cannot see because the organ that deals with seeing the light does not function. So Paul is revving his New Testament engine and just spinning his wheels in the same spot, trying to get blind people to see the light or the mystery of God, instead of healing their eyes. Now it's interesting that the Calvary death and the resurrection should have opened the eyes, but you will see again in this lesson that it did not. So Paul is there telling the people that they cannot see, and others he is basically saying, yeah, you can see because you have received sight, which is really odd, because the God of the Old Testament said he's going to blind them, and that sight will not return until he restores the people. If Israel has been restored, you can do 100 Calvary and resurrection episodes. The people will still be blind because no restoration has happened. No turning back to Israel has happened. I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits. Now, if I was the 13th or 14th apostle living back then, yeah, I would rather that they could see, even if they will become wise in their own conceits. If a blind person today walking with a dog, if I can get them to see, even though they will become too smart and arrogant and so on, because now they can say, I don't need to follow you, I don't need to, I'd rather them be able to see. They're probably just overexcited, and eventually they'll come to appreciate my assistance. I was taking them to the store and so on, and whatever. And now, the next little while, I still want to walk with them to the store, because they're so new, seeing I still want to show them around and whatever, they're new to sight. I still want to show them around, I still want to be their friend and so on. But if they're going to become arrogant and standoffish and I don't need you, I can do it on my own now, if they're going to cut me off immediately, I would still want them to see, even though they might become arrogant and conceited and so on in their own now ability to move around and so on. But Paul would rather the people, it seems to me, still be blind just in case they become conceited. So whatever happened to just allowing the normal processes of life to go on, knowing that when people learn this new thing now, they might just act out and so on. But, just allow people to grow and come into it and realize that, hey, Paul was actually just trying to do a good thing here. I shouldn't cut him off. He's a good teacher. I shouldn't cut him off because now I can see I don't need Paul to teach me anymore. But he himself seemed to have a problem because he said at one point he doesn't come behind any of the other apostles and so on, and he doesn't need to learn from him. Like they taught me. I can't remember how he said it, but basically he's saying they helped me not a bit, or they didn't improve him or whatever, or they didn't teach. Basically saying he got his stuff directly from the Lord. But that's just silly stuff. Anyway, so lest ye be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come. A serious problem there for me, because if blindness in part has happened to Israel, I don't know what he means by blind, because it looks like in the Old Testament blindness came upon all Israel. But if it has happened in part to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles come, now some are going to tell you that it's talking about the Gentiles who are Israelites living in other lands. But this, if you look in history, the Gentiles in the New Testament cannot simply be, I think. Because if you look at Christianity or the Jesus message, it was formerly a white European thing in history. And it was marketed among European countries. So if they are the Gentiles who are getting the light of Christ and they speak about the light of Christ, and what they speak is exactly what you read in the Bible, which means these people who are the Gentiles have that light of Christ. And because they are wrong, we know it is the same light that is in the New Testament, because it syncs with the wrongness of New Testament doctrine. Have that light of Christ. And because they are wrong, we know it is the same light that is in the New Testament, because it syncs with the wrongness of New Testament doctrine. So Paul is saying blindness has happened unto Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles. But Gentiles have long been full of Jesus. Gentiles have long been. So with Christianity being a European thing, obviously this Jesus message was for Europeans. And certainly for this Hebrew Israelite message and teaching and waking up of the Old Testament or the Torah, saying God is waking up the 12 tribes of Israel again, they're saying these people were black. So in the times of the Torah, no one knew a Calvary or a Jesus message, and it was not taught when the black Hebrew Israelites were up and running with their kingdom in Old Testament times, before they got blindness or before they got sent into captivity. After that happened, white European Jesus Calvary message began to be taught heavily on earth. This then means that in old black Israelite kingdom of Torah days, the European Jesus Calvary was not known on earth, and certainly not known in black Israel. That would then mean that it is a new thing that came on the scene after Israel went into captivity. So why is there any black Hebrew Israelite, so calling themselves, dealing with this European Jesus message of Calvary, when Torah Israelites never associated themselves with the spreading of a Calvary message and belief in sanctification by blood falling from a cross, and also never taught the resurrection of a man from the dead who gives salvation. That message was never taught and spread by Elijah, by Jeremiah, by Moses, by anyone in the Torah days. Never. Which then means if the Old Testament Hebrews did not teach that New Testament doctrine, it is not of the God of the Old Testament. So then, if we see the people today, the Europeans who took you into slavery, having the Jesus message and bringing Bibles to you and printing the Bibles for you and continue to be the ones printing the Bible today and making profit from it, it's clearly telling you that the New Testament Jesus message, or the light taught about in the New Testament, is a European light. It is a European doctrine. It is a European testament. And they print the Bibles. When you buy the Bibles, they're getting the money. It is their whole thing. So then, if it is their thing, they are the Gentiles. So until the fullness comes, so if Israel is still blind, which is the reason why you say you are trying to wake up these 12 tribes, that means the people who are heavily on earth in a mass kind of way, carrying the light, the spreading the message with the largest churches, because sure, black people have some large churches, but most of it is for white people, then that means that it is the Gentiles who are running the show, running the gospel. These are the Gentiles, because it is their religion. Now, look at this. He says, until the fullness of the Gentiles be come. So, Paul is here letting you know that Israel is going to be blind, the Israel through which light can be seen on earth, and no one else can. So you wonder where the Gentiles got their light from. How can there be the fullness of the Gentiles coming in to a light that Israel no longer can display because they are blind and cannot do anything where light is concerned? Let me read another verse for you. Isaiah 43 verse 10, ye are my witnesses, saith the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen. So he's talking about Israel, the Israelites, that ye may know, so other people don't know, and believe me and understand, so other people don't have understanding, that would be the Gentiles, that I am he. If I am he, then ye can be my witnesses, because you know and believe that I am he, by a revelation that they got supposedly on Mount Sinai, and through all the manifestations of his deliverance and power and miracles and so on throughout the Old Testament times. Since he did not do that with other nations, that means that other nations, such as the Gentiles, cannot be his witnesses because they have not been able to believe or know of his expressions of his godness, because he did not reveal himself to them like he did to Israel. If he did not reveal himself to them, they cannot be witnesses. So Israel is the witness. If the Most High has said that Israel is blind, how can the Gentiles get light? And how can then Jesus come and show the light to them in New Testament times? Because the Israelites, if they heard anything, they would have to verify the stuff, verify the doctrine and so on. So if the Gentiles got in New Testament times, spreading all throughout Europe and so on, got the message of Jesus, the light of Jesus from John chapter 1, he's shining his light, why did they not go back formally to the Hebrews to try to check and verify that this is the light that they had from the Old Testament times, from the Torah times? Is this the light of your God shining through Jesus, his son? But they don't do that. They just continue to do their own thing, and you know that because they do not go to you to verify stuff. You don't matter to them where this light is concerned. So their light is a strange light. It is not the light of the God of the Torah. So Paul is here saying that Israel is blinded until the fullness of the Goyim come in. Any fullness should not be dealing with these people, but rather the people of the Most High, to whom light was given, so that there can be a standard of revelation, or a standard of the witness by which anything else that calls itself light can be measured. That standard of witness would be that of the Israelites, who the Most High said are his witness. Ye are my witnesses. So as long as Israel is out of commission, as long as Israel's light or eyes just won't work, because they're in punishment, in captivity, they've been closed off, their light has gone from them. There is no longer any light by which to use to measure the new light of the New Testament Calvary system and resurrection. The New Testament is fake. Now let's look where Paul would have got that blindness from. The root verse. It would have been from some place like Isaiah 29 verse 10. For the Lord hath poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and hath closed your eyes. The prophets and your rulers, the seers, hath he covered. Verse 11, and the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, read this, I pray thee. And he saith, I cannot, for it is sealed. So that's where Paul is getting this blindness from. but it is something dealing with just Israel. Now, how can some new people in the New Testament times under the Romans who did not know God, by their lifestyle you can tell that, how can they get a light when the Torah is telling you that even the Israelites who knew originally what light was, because they have been cursed with blindness, the vision of not some but all of them, in Isaiah 29:11, the vision of all is become as the words of darkness, something that is sealed in a book. So when they are asked about it, they cannot teach about it. So even if the Roman set up Christ followers would have gone to an Israelite, even Apostle Paul or anybody else in New Testament times, and said, is this it? Or gone to an Israelite priest, the few, one or two that was left because the Romans put in their own priest in the Israelite system, even a real Hebrew Israelite would not have been able to look in the book and tell them, yeah, that's really Christ that died and resurrected. This is the man, this is the man, this is the Son of God that's bringing salvation. They cannot give that information to anyone in the New Testament 2,000 years ago. They cannot give it to any Pontius Pilate or to any governor of Rome or any of the provinces of Rome. They cannot give it to any Hebrew Israelite person as well in the New Testament times 2,000 years ago. Why? Because they cannot look at Jesus or look in the scrolls or look in any book or look at any activity that Jesus said he was doing and people said he did, with the healing of people, walking on water, and also of raising the dead, Lazarus, and so on, and miracle with wine and water and so on. They cannot read anything in actuality or in a book and confirm that this is it, because we can see that this is it. No. Why? Because seeing or vision of all is become as words that are sealed or words that are darkness, words that do not lead to light or lead to witnessing anymore. No one can witness as an Israelite 2,000 years ago and be a witness of Christ, because they cannot even be a witness of God, because God might have chosen them to be his witness, but because he has sealed up his light, the witness is no longer able to shine through, because light has been denied them until the Most High change it again. And in Joel chapter 2 and 3, he says that he will pour out again his spirit upon them. So the light came to be a witness. The light came by the pouring out of the Spirit, the visitation of the Spirit upon Israel in Old Testament times. But now, when in the future, now when he pours back the oil and the wine and pours up the Spirit upon them, and their young men and old men shall see visions and so on, then vision returns, then light returns. So there is no witness of God right now. There's none. Now, when you say there are Israelites on earth, you are simply repeating history. We know that one day this people was a witness. But you cannot be a witness if light is not shining anymore. Because light is not working for you now until you are restored. Ye are my witnesses was spoken by Isaiah, because at that time the kingdom was still up and running. But when he took down the kingdom, he removed his presence from the kingdom. He removed his blessing from the kingdom. He removed his light from the kingdom. He removed the prophets from the kingdom. He removed the seers from the kingdom. He removed everything that had to do with him being present in the kingdom. And if God is not present in your kingdom, you have no kingdom. And if the kingdom is a kingdom of light, there is no light. Or why do you seek the Lord? Why doesn't he just activate? Because the kingdom of light is no longer working. Ye are my witnesses was spoken at a time when the people were the witnesses. They are no longer. But he says he will choose them again. He will turn back to them again. And Calvary was not that doing, not that happening. So the vision is like a book that is sealed. Sealed, katham, to seal up. to fasten up by sealing, to lock up. Like when you take a piece of lumber and nail up across a door, and you put some big plywood and nail up the windows around the old house that's not being used anymore to prevent people from going in some. The whole thing is sealed up. You cannot see what's in there. You can also not enter. You do not know what was left in that place. You do not know what was left in that place. You cannot speak of what was in that place except a memory of it. So your teaching today of Hebrew Israelite is just a memory of what we say was there in the Old Testament times of that kingdom called Israel. But you do not speak authoritatively of what the kingdom is now, because there is no such kingdom. That's why he says, when I return, you will build again the old waste places. Why? Because you will set up the kingdom again. How can he set it up again if it is still around? There is no kingdom of Israel right now, because the whole thing was sealed up, and a kingdom cannot operate without its seers and its prophets and so on. And it's magic. Although magic is a bad word, I'm learning that now. But if the magic is not there, it is no longer a kingdom, because this was a kingdom of quote-unquote magic. It cannot exist without the magic. So it's sealed up, it's closed up, and so on. All right, so this is it here. So Isaiah is telling you that he has put them in a deep sleep. This is where Paul got it from. And he's obviously, from what I'm showing him, not teaching the stuff right, because he's just another fake New Testament teacher, the 13th or 14th apostle. Let's look at two more verses here from the New Testament again now. 2 Corinthians 3:14. 2 Corinthians 3 and verse 14. But their minds were blinded, for until, now he got that part right, for until this day remaineth the same veil. You see that? That's what I told you. Until the Most High does the stuff, the people are still blind, the book is sealed up and so on. But so at that time in his day, it was still true. Apparently, he is saying that until this day remaineth the same veil untaken away. Now, if Christ died and resurrected before he became an apostle, how can until this day come out of his mouth that the veil is not taken away? Wouldn't the resurrection take away the veil immediately? The veil in the temple was rent in twain, meaning the blindness would have been gone. Everything is done. And Jesus did say himself on the cross, it is finished. So if it is finished, and that was a true salvation of God, then the blindness is finished. The curse is finished. The captivity is finished. Obviously, it is not finished. You are still in captivity, and there's still a lot of blindness. So he says, until this day, the veil is taken away in the reading of the Old Testament, which veil is done away in Christ. Obviously, if people do not understand the Old Testament today, according to the Hebrew Israelites, then the veil of the Old Testament is not done away in Christ, because a lot of people who know Christ do not know what's in the Old Testament and don't understand it. I sat in the Christian church for years, and he told me I'm an Israelite. And even though I was in the Christian church for years, I did not know what was in the Old Testament. So the veil was not taken away. When the veil is taken away, people will not need teachers. I'm sure you know where I'm going now, but let me read it anyway for those who do not know it. Because when the Most High turns back, it will be. No one will need all this excessive teaching and so on. Jeremiah 31, verse 34, a couple of verses before that, told that the Most High would deliver his people and so on. He's going to restore the covenant, whatever. But verse 34 says, after that happens now, he says, and they shall teach no more every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith the Lord, for I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sins no more. So it is their iniquity that is really showing that the blindness is intact. Now he says they will teach no more every man his neighbor. So when that restoration comes and the blindness is removed, nobody will need to teach, because they're going to have the light in themselves, and my people shall be all righteous. So the moment Christ dies on Calvary, and the veil in the temple is rent in twain, and the light should just shine. You would not need to run around teaching. Everybody, every Israelite back then should have been that, whoa, come to it. Not just some, but all of them. And the Romans would have had to take off and run. If they see all these people shining up with the light, they would just run, because that's what Joel chapter 2 and 3 says. When we get that spirit back, the enemies are going to go down. So no, Christ was not the bringing of that light and the restoration. And if he was, not some, but all would have returned, because they would have all seen the light. But Paul is going to let you know that only some, right? Because he said the veil taken away in the reading of the Old Testament, which veil was done away in Christ. So if it's done away, it is not present anymore. If it's done away, it does not exist anymore. That means not just some Israelites that Paul and the other apostles reached would have seen the light, but all Israelites, even the ones you choose to call Gentiles who are in foreign lands, all of them would have seen. Because if the Most High in Isaiah 29 verse 10 put blindness upon Israel, then that means wherever Israel travels through the world, whether in captivity or just running around looking for a way to make life now, make living in different lands, they're carrying the blindness with them as they travel through those different lands, because the Most High put it on them. Well, if now God takes off the blindness through Christ, then wherever those Israelites are situated all throughout the world, the blindness is relieved. It's just gone away. So the one on his job over there, the one building a tent over there, the one as a horsemith over there, the one doing this, doing that, the one down by the seaside doing their fishing or whatever, wherever the Israelite was in 2,000 years ago, wherever that Israelite was, when Christ resurrected, the light should have gone away. When he died and resurrected, it would just disappear like that. And nobody would need to run around and teach each other. You can see. If the person is blind that I was helping, and now they finally get sight, do I have to tell them that they can see? Yeah. No, they would know that they can see. Because they would more be quick. I can see. Right? You don't need to tell somebody they can see. They can know. Now you might want to run a test to see just how well their sight is. You're like, how many fingers am I holding up? If they tell you like 13, you know, okay, something is wrong. You're seeing extra. But that's just this test to see how well. But now, 2 Corinthians 4 and verse 4. So when Paul said it's done away in Christ, no, it was not done away, because you're still teaching people who are blind to the Torah by telling them God sent us to raise up, and some of them don't want to hear you because it's not done away. They are still blind. That's why you're trying to force them and teach them so much and push it down their throat. Because you know these people are blind, they can't see, so let me repeat it again. And you go out there every day on your YouTube and on the street to try to make sure they can see. They are blind because it was not done away in Christ. 2 Corinthians 4 and verse 4. In whom the God, and this is the last verse, in whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. Either Paul is saying the God of the Torah, who blinded their minds, is the God of this world, which usually in the Christian church you call him Satan or the devil, God of this world. Either that's what Paul is saying, or Paul is saying something equally as serious by saying that there is another God who is the God of this world to whom this blindness is credited. Which then would mean that Paul, the 14th apostle, is lying to the New Testament people by telling them it is not the God of Isaiah 29:10 of the Torah that blinded Israel, but it is another God, Satan, the devil, Lucifer, who blinded their eyes. Either when you pick, Paul is still wrong, is treading on dangerous grounds here, and it just shows more that the New Testament is fake, any one you take. It's the God of the Torah, the God of the people who blinded them. It is not another God, some extra God or Satan who blinded the people. The Most High blinded them. Isaiah 29:10. So Paul is saying the God of this world, which would be Satan, blinded them, but that's clearly wrong. Of them which believe not, lest the light of the gospel of Christ. So hear what Paul is saying now. They are blind by this particular God that he chooses. They are blind by that God of this world until or lest they see the glorious gospel of Christ, which is the light that would let them see. So when the people resume sight again and can now see now, they will no longer see the Old Testament Torah light that was given on Sinai. They will no longer see 613 sparks of light, rays of light. They will now see a different light, the light of Christ. This Christ who never repeated the commandments except just one or two here and there. This Christ who never taught the Torah completely, but just a bit and a piece here and there. So they will see something new through Christ. When the God of the Old Testament kept having people return back to old stuff. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, because you wanted them to remember the initial stuff and don't take on new stuff. Don't forget this word that I command you this day. But Paul says there will be a new light that they will begin to see when their eyes come open again. When the Torah tells you that God has blinded the people and sent them into captivity and so on, and one day I will renew the same old covenant, original covenant with you. The New Testament is fake, and Paul is lying to every believer who believes the New Testament. So unless they see this glorious gospel of Christ, this gospel of Christ no Israelite knew and taught back then, and they were not saved by it either in the Old Testament. The gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them. Take a look at it for yourself. This is copycat number 2. Glad you listened. Glad you are able to come to understanding if you choose to. And I'll see you with copycat number 3. This is the New Testament is Fake series. Yalak Emet channel, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon. There will be more.